So today we're going to be dropping the old engine. We're going to drop the old 4AGE out of the car in preparation for getting the new silver top in, which is just bagged there on the engine stand. So in preparation for doing this type of job, first off you're going to need some axle stands or jack stands, and I only have these 2-ton ones here. You want to be able to get the car up the rear end of the car up as high as you can, so you can work underneath the car at the rear end here. And also when you're dropping the engine, you have to be able to lift the car high enough so that this engine can be removed. Thankfully I have a hoist, so I'm just going to hoist up the rear of the car and then roll this out on just a simple furniture dolly, furniture mover. Those things work great for moving engines. So in preparation for doing this, what you have to do is disconnect everything from the engine itself so that when you drop it, nothing breaks. So everything from the fuel lines to the coolant hoses to the speedometer cable that goes into the transmission, you also have the throttle body linkage. So lots of cables, hoses. You just have to make sure they're all disconnected, and then you're going to move them out of the way when you drop the engine. And you can do this, I've heard you can do this with 2 jack stands, so one on the engine, one on the transmission, and lower it. But the safest way is just going to be using an engine hoist and just grabbing the engine on the hooks, there's 2 of them, and then just lowering it. And since this is an automatic transmission, which is fairly large and fairly heavy, I'm also going to be putting a jack stand under this part of the transmission as I'm lowering it with the hoist. So after everything's disconnected, again you can notice the intake manifold is removed, and same with the alternator, the exhaust heat shield. The wiring harness has been removed here just because I want to make sure nothing gets damaged. That takes a little bit of work. You got to take the fuel rail off. You see the distributor plugs are all off. What else here? Yeah, I think that's about it. And then what we're just going to do is drop with the hoist, drop it onto that furniture dolly, and then once we do that, we're going to lift the rear of the car up with the hoist and then roll out the engine. And then we'll be done. We can clean this engine bay up, get it nice and clean, and then get the new engine in there. Alright, oh, just one last thing here. Looks like there's 4 engine mounts. So one in the back here, one in the front, one on the side, and then one in the front and rear. So 4 in total. And once you have the hoist in place and hooked up to the engine and the jack stand under the transmission, you're going to be releasing these mounts, and then the engine will drop. So we'll do that now, and we'll show you what it looks like. So just one thing I forgot to mention. Before you drop the engine, it's a good idea to drain the oil from the engine. And in my case, I got an automatic transmission, so I drained the transmission fluid as well. Just easier to do it when the engine's still in the car. And that means when you start taking apart the engine, if you're going to rebuild it or something, it just doesn't get so messy. So go ahead and drain those fluids. And then once you've done that, you can disconnect the coolers. So you can see right there where my finger's pointing, that's the oil cooler for the engine. And because this car has an automatic transmission, it actually has a transmission cooler right there on both sides. So those hoses need to be disconnected. It's going to get a little bit messy, some drips are going to happen, but just put some carbon underneath the car and it'll be fine. And now we're ready to drop. Alright, so we've got the hoist in place here, just behind the car, and we've got the engine hooked up on the 2 mounting points there with some chain. And what we're going to do here is put a little bit of tension on this, and then we're going to release the mounts. So the green book says to do the front and back, and then do the sides. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and then once that's all done, we can lower everything. And again, we're going to put a jack underneath this one because it's fairly heavy, and all the connection points for the hoist are on the engine side. So we don't want that transmission torquing the engine when we release it. So let's go ahead and do that. So the engine has been dropped, and what we had to do here is lower one side, so lower the hoist a little bit, and then lower the jack a little bit, lower the hoist, lower the jack, until you could get it onto the furniture dolly. Now it's a little bit more complicated because the legs of your hoist get in the way, so you have to do a little bit of maneuvering. But finally it gets on there. And so now that that's completely disconnected from the car, what we need to do is lift the rear of the car up so we can clear this engine and get that engine out of there. So we'll be using the hoist to lift up the rear end of the car. The car has these hooks on either side, and we're just going to put the chains through that, and careful not to damage this bumper. Just put a towel there or something, and then we're going to lift the car up and pull the engine out. You can see it there just sitting on the dolly. So we're actually not going to be lifting it from the rear tow hooks. You can actually see here that the bumper is removable quite easily. Those tow hooks are actually not tow hooks. They're just they're used there to secure the car when you're transporting it. So those aren't secure. What we're instead doing here is put a chain to the left and right engine mount, and then we're just going to lift the car up high enough so that we can get that engine out. We're just using the hoist to do that right now.